On days like this, I appreciate the fact that we get to sing and listen to Christmas music together. I am thankful for that. We are going to begin. The choir is not singing this morning, but we're going to begin with a hymn.
So if you are in reach of a hymnal, please grab one. We're going to sing number 131 in the hymnal. It is Angels from the Realms of Glory, primarily because of the little chorus line at the end of it. Come and worship, worship Christ the newborn King. We want to focus today on reverence, and that is where it begins, to come and worship together Christ the newborn King. So if you'd like to stand here in the room, this is a pretty good stand-up Christmas carol. Number 131, Angels from the Realms of Glory. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you very much.
I would like to introduce the people who are here this morning. First of all, we will start with those who are in the meeting house. And this morning we have Gage Stimmer, who is here with us, and Sharon Reinard and Ellen Craig. We also have Doug Baker and Kay and Tony Mendenhall. We have Eileen Critch and Cleo and Diana McFarland. It's good to have you guys here. We have Jim Wells, who is in the back. Jim, you're not forgotten. It is good. And Dennis is not forgotten. I'll start early with Dennis. On the other side of the meeting house this morning, we have Rob and Val Pearson. It is good to see you guys back here this morning. We have Doug and Kathy Simmons. We have Michelle Lilly and Dennis Engel. We have Janet Ross and her daughter-in-law, Amy Ross. I'll get it right. So sorry about that. We also have Dave Longnecker and Susan Simons. We have Missy Smith and Susie Turner. We have Kendra Holliger. It's nice to have the doctor in the house. And we have Norman Karen Peters, who are here, and Marcia Holliger, who is here, and Jeff and Mary Clark. It's nice for you to sit with Jeff today, and of course Ron and I. So those are the friends that we have gathered, and I am thankful for each of you being here. On Zoom this morning, we have Kenny Girton and Teresa Wallace from here in Winchester. We have Bill and Joyce Wagner from, yes, it's good to see you guys from Muncie, Indiana. It is good to see Lois Hogue from Sarasota, Florida. We have Delmer Ferguson and Angela Ferguson. I saw her there just a minute ago, who are in Overland Park, Kansas. We're glad to see you guys this morning. We have Stan and Gretchen Hendrickson, who are here with us this morning. It's good to see both of you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, there's Gretchen. We have Terry Reinert, who is here with us from his home here in Winchester. We have Kathy Burton, who is here with us, and I think she's with her parents. I'm not sure. She's somewhere else. Kathy, it is wonderful to see you this morning. We have Cliff Painter from California. It is good to see you, Cliff. Thank you for being present with us this morning. And he doesn't look quite as cold as what he has in past, so maybe that bodes well for California. We have Dwight Ferguson, who is here with us from Bella Vista, Arkansas. Welcome, Dwight. We have Nita Burton, who is here with us, I think from her home here in Winchester. It's good to see you. And Keith Kendall, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you for being present. Keith is down at Richmond at Friends Fellowship. And Pat Denny, it's good to see you from Bloomington, Indiana. It is good to have you here to this morning, Pat. We have Tony and Marcia Critch from their home here in Winchester. It's good to see you guys this morning. We have Suzanne Weber from her home here in Winchester. We have Deborah Lilly from her home in Modoc, Indiana. And we have Charlie and Valerie Boyd from their home in Wichita, Kansas. So thank you all who have gathered here this morning. It is just wonderful to have you here. I think Ron is going to have another hymn.
This carol is a little less known than the usual ones you hear when people are out caroling, but it's one that I've always really appreciated. It is number 143 in the hymnal, Infant Holy, Infant Lowly. So if you would not mind turning back to your hymnal, we're going to have to make an adjustment on this mic stand. Doesn't want to stay where it's supposed to stay. Number 143, Infant Holy, Infant Lowly. Infant holy, infant lowly, for his bed a cattle stall. Oxen lowing, little knowing, Christ the babe is Lord of all. Swift the ringing, angels singing, Noel's ringing, tidings bringing, Christ the babe is Lord of all. Christ the babe is Lord of all. Flocks were sleeping, shepherds keeping vigil till the morning noon. Saw the glory, heard the story, tidings of a gospel true. Thus rejoicing, free from sorrow, praising voices, great tomorrow. Christ the babe was born for you. Christ the babe was born for you. Thank you again for your great singing.
I would like to tell a quick story this morning. This is in the summer of 1778. A British battleship intent on plundering sailed into Nantucket Harbor and aimed its guns at the largely Quaker community that was there. Despite the ship's blatant show of hostility, William Roch, a well-respected Quaker elder, greeted the British commander, Sir Conway Etheridge, at the dock and invited him to his home for dinner. After the meal, the commander, increasingly uncomfortable with the host's warm hospitality, announced that it was time to begin the plunder. And the commander was shocked when William said that he would show him that he should begin with his own home because, as a successful businessman, he could absorb the loss better than some of his less prosperous neighbors. Not understanding why William would make such an unselfish and generous offer, the commander asked if there were other people like him in the community. And William Roch then took him to meet a merchant who had given 400 barrels of flour to the poor during the previous winter. And then he took him to a shopkeeper who had given away blankets and shoes. Legend has it that the commander said that he could hardly believe that there were 3 such people in the whole world, let alone Nantucket. He then returned to the battleship and, to the disappointment of his crew, sailed away. God calls us to share our resources with those in need. When we do not, economic disparities arise, causing disputes, social tensions, violence, and even more. That is why right sharing of world resources is a central issue to practice peace. Our attitude toward sharing our money and our material resources is essentially a spiritual matter. The Russian mystic and political philosopher Nicholas Berdyaev wrote, "Bread for myself is a material question, but bread for my neighbor is a spiritual question." Our level of attention to the equitable sharing of our common wealth, especially in our treatment to the poor, is an indication of the spiritual health and ethic of any person, any religious community, any state, or any nation. So there's not a lot of lessons for reverence in that story, except for when we were looking at Ron, one of the queries that Ron asked was about what other things do we have reverence for? And I'm sorry, but my mind went to a reverence for food. Food in that story brought people together. It made them hear one another and have compassion for one another. And on a day when we together as a community will gather for a communal meal, it makes me so thankful that we have the opportunity to sit together, to break bread together, and to share in the gift of life. Because not only do we do it here with each other, but we do it with this community. We bring peace to our community through the sharing of bread, and for that I am thankful. I appreciate all of you being here this morning.
Not sure why she did that, but I never am really sure. We'll get it out of the way here if we can. I'd like to begin by reading a passage that sometimes doesn't get paid much attention to in the whole nativity story. This is taken from the first chapter of Luke, starting with verse 26. And this is when the angel of the Lord comes to announce the fact that the Messiah soon would be born. So it says there in Luke 1:26, "In the 6th month, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, 'Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you.' Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, 'Do not be afraid. Mary, you have found favor with God. You will be with child and give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. His kingdom will never end.' 'How will this be?' Mary asked the angel, 'since I am a virgin?' The angel answered, The Holy Spirit will come upon you. The power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who was said to be barren is now in her 6th month. For nothing is impossible with God. I am the Lord's servant, Mary answered. May it be to me just as you have said. And then the angel left her. Mary then has an encounter with the mother of John the Baptist, Elizabeth, their distant relative. And then after that encounter, as they compared notes of the miracles that were going to happen to them, Mary spoke or sang this song. This is from verses 46 and forward in Luke chapter 1. Talk about an expression of reverence. Listen to what Mary had to say after she encountered the angel of the Lord. My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. For he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. So from now on, all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is his name. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, even as he said to our fathers. And that section closes with the statement that Mary then stayed with Elizabeth for about 3 months and then returned to her home in Nazareth. This is another one of those weeks where I left out a whole lot more than I put into what we sent out last night. I had so many notes that it almost kind of got me confused because the scriptures are just filled with references to reverence. And I had such a hard time deciding which ones would be most useful for us to think about today. So forgive me if I've left out ones that you are familiar with, but that is why we're doing worship sharing, so that you can add to and correct, if necessary, what I have sent out to you. A quick reminder, as I pointed out in the first part of last night's piece, that we have chosen to focus on hope as the theme for this entire season of celebrating Jesus' birth, this Advent season. And it is truly a season of hope. Hope is not something that just it's here and then it's gone. It is an enduring thing. Last week we talked about beginning that with hope for a spiritual awakening in the world around us, in our own lives, in our families' lives, in our community's life, in our society's life, and in the entire world. Because it really does seem as though an awful lot of people are sleeping rather than paying attention to God. So that's what we began this series with. And now today, my hope, and this really springs from that first one of spiritual renewal and awakening, my hope is that there will be a renewal of reverence in the people, in our homes, in our communities, in our society, in our nation, and in the world. It's my conviction that that renewal of reverence will happen. It almost, not automatically, but it almost follows on automatically when true spiritual awakening happens, because when it's genuine spiritual awakening, we are suddenly awakened to God. And it's kind of like Queen Esther going in to make her request to the king to spare her people. And, that was a complicated story, but the point is made in the book of Esther that you don't enter the presence of the king without his invitation and without his permission. And if you try to enter his presence on your own initiative, more than likely you get your throat cut rather than get your request answered. That's the picture of reverence that I grew up with, that you just don't mouth off to anybody that you want to, that you respect those who are in authority, and you don't ignore and you don't shout down those who are authorities over you. So when I talk about renewal of reverence, that's a little piece of the background in my own brain of what I miss about a time when people were way more conscious that God is real, that Emmanuel is true, God is with us. And why we don't revere his presence a little bit more is just beyond me. But it's because people have no concept of who God is and what God has done. And so they pay no attention, and they don't mind shouting him down because they suddenly have become more important than the God who created them. When Pam and I are driving around listening to the radio, when we're watching TV, or sometimes when we're just out and about, we see things that strike me as so irreverent, so ignoring of the goodness of the Lord, that I will often, and some of you have heard me say this too, because I say it too often, nothing is sacred anymore. You know, that feeling? When you hear stuff on TV and you think, they can't say that. They can't show that. It appears as though nothing is really sacred anymore. That's why I long for a renewal of reverence in our culture, so that some things that are clearly of God will be once again deemed as sacred. They are sacred, whether anyone recognizes it or says so or not. But I want people to see again that the Lord who came to save us, who gave his life to forgive us, if that's not sacred, then nothing is. And I believe with all my heart that that history is true. There are many kinds of reverence, and I tried to spell out just a few of those, but there are many, many more. One of our crews will ask, which ones did we miss or leave out? Which ones would you add, the things around you that you know are reverent? I remember so clearly as a kid, Hutchinson Friends Church, and you know, we were kids. We were just horsing around, chasing each other, running in the church building, and I would get scolded and slowed down by the adults because that's not reverent to run in the church building. Well, you know, maybe God is pleased that there were kids in the meeting house. Maybe God is pleased that they were enjoying being there in the place that was deemed sacred by our parents. So there is a balance in all of that, because I think that's also true, that God really does delight in children who are having a good time, even in what they called his house. I also noted a real irony in those two psalms that are at the top of the essay. One of them says, "Be still and know that I am God." We have always equated reverence with this real quietness about us. But then the next psalm, Psalm 95, says, "Shout to the Lord. Make loud noise to the Lord with instruments." And you have to begin to realize that reverence is not a question of volume. It's a question of the heart. It's a question of intent. It's a question of purpose. Both are acceptable. They need to be done at the appropriate times in the appropriate ways. But God is glad for our quietness. I know that the Lord is glad when we appear in worship prepared, that we have been stilled before him even before we got here. I know that God delights in that because he knows we are listening, and he is ready to speak to us if we will just park our stuff at the door and let him speak and listen intently. But I also know that God delights when on mornings like this, everybody is so happy to see one another that they just can't keep quiet, and they move around and make sure they get to speak to everyone. Reverence is not a matter of volume. It's a matter of obedience, a matter of purpose. What I really intended to do was to include all of the Christmas story characters in this essay to try to point out the ones that displayed real reverence and the ones who didn't. And I got so deeply involved in other things that I didn't leave enough room to do that. But I was going to include Mary and the reverence of her saying, "May it be unto me just as you have said," when the angel said, "You're not married, you're still a virgin, and you're going to be pregnant." Most women would find that a rather shocking thing. They probably wouldn't want to accept that just out of hand like that. But instead, in reverence, Mary, knowing that this came from God, said, "May it be to me exactly as you have said." Elizabeth, her relative, similar experience. Those are both in Luke chapter 1. The angels who came to inform the shepherds, singing glory to God in the highest and on earth peace among people. That was reverence in its full glorious display. The shepherds then, leaving their work, risking their jobs, ran into Bethlehem to see what the angels had announced. That was reverence, to go out of my way, to inconvenience myself for the sake of worshiping and glorifying God. That is true reverence. To go and see. Simeon and Anna, the elderly folks who were at the temple on the 8th day after Jesus was born when he was taken for circumcision, both of them, in their approach to Jesus and Joseph and Mary, displayed such reverence. They had been waiting for God to do this thing, and because of their reverence, they knew this was it. And they expressed that beautifully in that instance. Contrast those reverences with the irreverence of Herod, who was threatened by even the thought that someone might come and take his job. And he put out the hit squad to go and find this baby, now maybe as old as 2, and put an end to him and put an end to that threat. That is irreverence in all its glory. And it should make us ask the question, in my life, am I agreeing with God's purposes and intentions so that I am not harming his kingdom, but rather am advancing his kingdom? Herod, in irreverence, wanted to shut it down. All of these other folks, in their reverence, welcomed God's movement among them. Those are the things that I really hope that you might think about and take away from today. The queries that we've posed at the end of this essay are these. What situations in your life and discipleship most readily evoke a response of reverence in you? What things bring you to a place of deep reverence? Number 2, what other aspects of life besides those listed above, all these types of reverence, what other aspects of life should cause reverence to well up within us? Those are the things. What did I leave out? What did I not get to? Number 3, which Christmas story character's reverence do you find most instructive, most moving, and why is that? And number 4, what specific irreverences in today's world trouble you most deeply? They are legion. And some of them should trouble us very deeply. I'm curious to hear what irreverences, what disdain expressed for God upsets you the most. What is a Christian's best response to the irreverences around us all the time? We would love to hear what is on your heart today, what God may speak through you. Please be faithful to obey that nudge. Rob will have the mobile microphone. Online, Pam will be here to help you unmute. We welcome your responses to these queries or other things that God may have placed on your heart and in your mind. Thank you for being with us today. God bless you all. Please be faithful as we wait quietly in the Lord's presence.
Well, since Ron stole my example, he took the very thing I was going to go to, which was Mary there in Luke. Yeah, he often does that. I'll take the flip side of the coin instead then and talk about irreverence. And I would like to read something from the first chapter of Romans. Furthermore, since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, He, God, gave them up to a depraved mind to do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They're gossips, slanderers, God haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent new forms of evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, and merciless. To that list, I would add they seem to have a fear of the complexity of truth. And whereas a fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom, the next foundation to wisdom would be a, an honest pursuit of truth. I was looking for some online groups, Christian groups, that I might take part in and interact with. And I came across one that was called the Historic Society or something like that of early Christianity, and it had rules set up. And in the rules, number 7 was this statement about how they do not allow any discussion of critical race theory, and furthermore, anyone who believes critical race theory cannot be a Christian.
Whoa.
I was flabbergasted by such a concept. These people who claim to be interested in the truth and the historicity of the early Christian church, how much could you trust what they come up with, what they claim is truth in history? A simple Google, just a simple Google, taking 5 or 10 minutes online today could reveal the actual true story of what critical race theory, how it came about. It was, by the way, first developed by a group of white male law students who were just trying to understand why we had so much racial strife in America at the time, which was in the early 60s during the civil rights movement. But today now it's labeled as socialist, and like I said, that they even make claims you can't even be a Christian if you believe this stuff. They don't even know what they're talking about, and they don't care. That kind of irreverence. Jesus is the truth, the life, and the way, the truth. So if we're going to pursue Jesus, we have to pursue truth. We have to have a desire to understand the truth. And the truth isn't always simple. You know, why is the sky blue, Daddy? Boy, you just opened a can of worms. Let's go into the real answer. You want to know the truth? It's quite complicated, honey. And most truth is. So I think that irreverence is one that I would add to the list enumerated in Romans. The fear of truth, or the lack of respect for truth. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that there's a gentleman by the name of Brennan Manning that I really like some of his things, and he used to be part of the Quaker yearly meeting, and he had a problem. He was a Catholic minister and stuff, whatever, but he's done some books called The Ragamuffin Gospel and some of those things. And I think reverence is a barometer of our faith. And I say that because you think about Mary when a virgin was told she was going to give birth. That would have maybe thrown her into depression. I don't have enough money to pay to buy the food or any of that. The gloom of that, of her, and this is how Brennan Manning looked at that as Christians, the difference between the nominal Christians and the real Christians are the barometer we use for our gloom and despair and those things. But Mary, her God was large. And so she looked at her God and the reverence to her God was bigger than that gloom and despair of becoming pregnant and giving birth and that. And so in that book, Ragamuffin Gospel, Brendan Manning talked about how we all do that with gloom and despair and all of the negative, bad things that are coming to us because our God is too small. And that meant a lot to me with his description of that.
Thank you.
Reverence for God by adding as a surtitle to the names of various humans, capital R-E-V, period, meaning Reverend so-and-so. I know many Quaker pastors are uncomfortable with this. I am. But some relish in it, in fact, to be called Reverend. It's been around for a long time, probably for maybe 5 or 6 centuries. But there's only really one entity that's worthy of reverence, real reverence, and that is God. I read someplace recently where it takes so many seconds to reach the moon at the speed of light. It takes so many minutes to reach the sun by the speed of light. It takes a long, long, long time to reach the edge of our Milky Way, our solar system, by the speed of light. And then they said it would take thousands of years to reach the edge of the universe by the speed of light. Well, what do they mean by the edge of the universe? There is no edge. What we see as a dark curtain when we look out into space is just space. And I wonder, well, the Russian cosmonauts, when they came back from their first flight into space, they said, "We found no God." Well, that's interesting. Because when I think of the majesty of the cosmos, it strikes me as awe-inspiring and reverence-inducing. And we shouldn't really diminish God's holiness and his awesomeness by adding reverend to anybody, whether it's right or most or doctor or whatever it is. There's only one thing, person, place that's worthy of real reverence, and that is the God who created the heavens and the earth and each and every one of us. Amen.
Thank you.
So talking about reverence, something that came to my mind, just getting into the sciencey mathematical stuff about it, that I think one thing that stood out to me a long time ago, I learned about this concept called the golden ratio or the Fibonacci sequence, which is a mathematical concept that it's a sequence of numbers that occurs in all aspects of life. That everything starts with a sequence where it starts from 1, and that 1 turns into 2, and that, the 1 plus the 1 equals 2, the 1 plus the 2 equals 3, the 2 plus the 3 equals 5, and so on and so forth. So everything grows kind of in this sequence of like moving on. And what the golden ratio is that you take this one number in the sequence and divide it by the number before it or after it. I can't remember exactly. So like, you would go on like 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on to infinity. And the further you get down the line, it keeps going. But when you divide that one number by the number before it, it gives you this particular number. And this number, mathematicians equate out to being the number of beauty. When physical living objects, their proportions line up to this particular number when they take all their measurements. Aesthetically, we recognize that to be more beautiful. So it's almost like beauty, in a sense, is like built into mathematics. I mean, that's just one example I'm thinking about. It's kind of hard for me to explain. I'm not a mathematician and I'm not a scientist, but like when I was learning about that, it was just like, beauty is coded into our existence, and it's you can discover it through any field, whether it be just like spiritually or mathematically, scientifically. And going to the guys that went into space and said we did not find a God. It's like God's all around us. It's like you have to go really out of your way to try to find reasons to believe that God doesn't exist, and ignore all the perfection and beauty that is in life everywhere. I mean, the perfection that is implemented into all the things that exist in our life exists in such a way that if you believe this happened by accident, I think that's just so much more foolish. I mean, the argument that there is a creative design, I mean, I feel like is overwhelmingly shifted in one direction. You have all these people who are just trying to pick and find all these little things, like, but what? God can't exist because of this. And it's just like, well, you can look at that, but if you're looking for reasons to believe that God does not exist and the world is full of awful, terrible things, and if you look hard enough, you'll find those things. But if you look for reasons to believe that God does exist, that beauty does exist, that love is abundant, you'll also find that too. So our perspective really does determine our reality. I mean, to have reverence is to choose to look at the beauty of life in everything and in every aspect, and it does exist in every aspect, even in the ones that we think don't have beauty, in the hardships and the suffering of life, because great meaning and growth can be found through those too. Love is abundant and transcends all suffering and all concepts. So I think in all things we should seek the love of God, and the one force that takes away from that, I think, is fear. and also pride. That's what I got.
Thank you. Pat, do you want to unmute? You're unmuted now.
Thank you. I'm having a problem accepting the who am I to decide if somebody's reverent or not. I think that really isn't up to me to decide or to label, I guess. I think kind of what Gage said, there are, no matter what people do or say or whatever, God made these people and there's good in them too. I find it that you what you seek you find, and if you start out with someone thinking they're evil or they're whatever, then that's what you convince yourself they are. And maybe they are, but there has to be a spark of God in there that is good, that is not evil. And if you concentrate on that good aspect of them, even all these people in the Bible, we read this, but we don't know these people. It's an interpretation of what somebody thinks they said, basically. And maybe they did and maybe they didn't. But I really have a problem with judging who's reverent and irreverent. The only thing I can think of is kind of what you said about the cosmos and nature. I'm very reverent in nature. It's just beyond my imagination how things can grow and die and grow again. And that's where I'm reverent. But I don't feel comfortable judging other people's reverence. That's just me.
Thank you, Pat.
We are fast approaching the top of the hour. There are, this is a room full of hungry folks with a lunch downstairs soon. So we will end this shortly, but I do not want to steal anyone's opportunity to be obedient to God. So we will wait quietly for just a couple more minutes. If you know that you should offer something that can help someone who's here today, please be faithful.
Something that I've been sitting with is just the thought that irreverence and ignorance can go hand in hand. I think because we revere something, we have reverence for God and the practices associated with worshiping God. I think we need to be careful what we are expecting from others, because if others have grown up not knowing God, it's easy for us to, I guess, judge and say, you know, well, gosh, that's just so irreverent, or that's just so offensive. But if these people didn't grow up having that reverence and that example of how important God is and how we should respect God, if they grew up without that, I don't know. I think it helps me to be more compassionate, thinking that irreverence and ignorance can often go hand in hand, and we need to approach that with love and instead of judgment, which is so easy to jump to, especially I know for me. So, just something I've been thinking.
Thank you.
Going along with what was just said, Ron's example of the kids running in the church as we were growing up, I look at it from the perspective of the people that were trying to tame us down. Most of them were the founding members of that church. And the amount of effort and the hard work that they put into starting that church and building that church, I believe that's where they were coming from, expecting the kids to show reverence for the house of God. I agree that God is very happy to see children happy, but that's where those people were coming from. And then I think about the cosmonauts, and I just have to laugh that they would say that they didn't find God. All they had to do was hold their hand out in front of their face and just move one finger. And that did not happen by accident. They didn't have to go to space to find God.
Thank you.
Well, as the Quakers always ask, are all hearts clear? I am grateful for these wise and profound things that have been shared today. Thank you for your faithfulness. I'm going to ask if we could close this time by singing together number 100. Let me make sure I get the right number here. I think it's 165. If I remember, yeah, it is. This is actually a song called Adoration that is particularly focused on the Magi, which came a year and a half or 2 years later. But we're not doing Advent in sequence this year. We're doing it around this topic of hope. And this little simple hymn says for me everything I need to say about reverence. So could we sing together Adoration number 165? Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Bow down before him, his glory proclaim. With gold of obedience and incense of lowliness, kneel and adore him, the Lord is his name. Fear not to enter his presence in poverty, bearing no gifts to present as your own. Bring truth in its beauty and love in its purity. These are the offerings to lay at his throne. I never saw that before we moved here and saw this hymnal, but it is by far my favorite Christmas carol. I love that chorus and what it says. Before we go, we do want to be sure that friends know what's happening around here. So we'll quickly look at some announcements and some prayer concerns. Everyone here in the room, just by their nose, can be quite sure of what's going to happen next around here. We will be moving down to the dining room to enjoy the annual holiday dinner, a kind of combination of Thanksgiving and Christmas family feast. That'll start probably in about a half an hour or so. So if you are here and ready to go, you can move on downstairs. And for those of you who are online, I wish I could put fragrances through the microphone, but they won't go. But we hope that you have a great lunch where you are together. And we will be thinking of you even if you couldn't be here. So that's today. Also following that today at somewhere around 2 o'clock, there will be Christmas caroling around town offered. And so we're asking that you meet over in the parking lot of the meeting house here and be there at least a few minutes before 2 o'clock so that we can divide up in cars and get around. That won't last all that long, but give you a little taste of the Christmas season. So if you'd like to come and help out with the Quaker caroling choir, join us over there just a little bit before 2 o'clock. Also today, there is an offering plate over on the table at the entrance to the parlor. It's there to receive contributions from friends for the support of our church's ministries, and also there to remind me to say thank you once again to all of you for your faithful support of our church. On Wednesday this week, the 11th of December, there will be prayer soup supper at 5:30 p.m. over at the parsonage. That will then be followed at 7 o'clock by the Welcome Class Bible Study by Zoom, and then that will be followed at about 8:15 by the Fabulous Friends every other couple of weeks check-in, and you are most welcome to join us for those things. That's on Wednesday starting at 5:30 and then at 7 and at 8:15. On Thursday this week, we will have choir practices. The vocal choir will practice at 6:30 in the choir room downstairs, and that will be followed by the chiming choir practice at 7:15 in the basement parlor. And then next Sunday, the 15th of December, we'll be back here in the same place, in the same manner, at the same time, 10 o'clock, for worship sharing by Zoom. And we hope that you'll join us and that you'll bring a friend. There will be a little bit of extra music next week. We're going to do all of the rest of the Christmas music next week because our pianist has to be gone on the 22nd. So you're going to get to hear all of the Christmas stuff we've been preparing next Sunday. So bring a friend to hear that extra music, and it will be really good. We always appreciate the stuff that Brian chooses for us to sing. Let me see here. I'm sure there are a couple of other things. The welcome class that will meet this coming Wednesday will be looking at lesson number 6 in the quarterly. So if you need one of those, there are quarterlies over on the table. And if you need the Zoom link, you just get in touch with Pam and she'll be sure that you're connected that way. Yeah, 2 other things that are at the bottom of our page. One is the reminder of the special Christmas offering that is taken each year by the Missions and Social Concerns Committee. This year we'll be supporting 4 different ministries. Jamaica Yearly Meeting of Friends. The second one is Mennonite Disaster Service, who are already hard at work down in the tornado and hurricane zone of the southeast of this country, helping people who have been so harmed. So we will contribute to what they are doing. The third thing is the local community Christmas basket project. We have a number of friends that are working on that. We've always supported that. And the fourth thing will be Gideon's International and their Bible placement project. We will not have a specified Gideon Sunday this year, but we do want to continue to financially support them. So if you put money in the Christmas offering for missions, it will go to those 4 things, and it will be matched by Best Special Project money as well. The last thing is the Personal Advent Stories invitation. If you would like to tell friends how Christ entered into your life, your personal Advent, if you'd like to tell friends that story and then hang an ornament on the tree over there that will symbolize what you say and remind us for years to come of how Christ came into your life, we would love to hear your story. Just get in touch with me and we'll be sure we schedule that for this month. So that invitation is open. On the back of our paper are the prayer concerns for today. We learned late this week that Becky Edmonds had been hospitalized once again over at Ball Memorial in Muncie. We did not get details about what exactly was the problem, so we will not give you medical information we don't have and are not sure of. But we simply would encourage you to be praying for Becky and also for Nate, who is working really hard to support her. They have just moved into a standalone apartment, I think, in the village over on the west side of Muncie where they recently were. And so they're still adjusting to a new residence as well as now a medical problem for Becky. So please be praying for both of them. Valerie Pearson is with us this morning. It's wonderful that she chose to get out and come and be with us. She is dealing with a viral infection that then caused Bell's palsy. And what she said to me when I went back there to greet her this morning was, "You haven't seen the other guy yet." She's looking pretty good. I'm so thankful that it's improving already, and we'll just continue praying that it will. And pray for Rob also, who is working to help her and get through this. He's not been feeling all that great himself, but they both seem pretty good shape today. So pray for the Pearsons. Gretchen Hendrickson has been with us today. She is recuperating after hospitalization last week for some heart care. Please be praying for her and for Stan. Sharon Reinert is with us in person today. Terry is at home. She has now been scheduled for her heart valve replacement surgery on the 22nd of January. So we've got a little bit of time to pray for her to be healthy and strong so that she can get through that procedure really quickly and well. Please be praying for both of the Reinerts. The Boyds have also been with us from Wichita, Kansas. I don't have any updated information on them, but I do know that Charlie is still dealing with this autoimmune illness and looking for doctors who are willing to help him find treatment. So please be praying for Charlie and for Valerie as they go through that. Megan Kirkpatrick had her arm and shoulder surgery about 10 days ago, I think, or something like that. And as a result, she is in a sling and unable to use a walker, which means that now she's not getting any exercise that would otherwise help her to recuperate in other ways from her accident injuries. So this saga just continues, but please be praying for Megan and for her family and all of the people who are pitching in to be with her and to help her through this crisis. The last name on here is Judy Addington. That is Janet Ross's niece. She had spinal surgery about 10 days ago. Janet, you can just nod. Is she getting along all right? Is doing well? She nodded yes. So we can give thanks to God that that surgery was successful and ask the Lord to heal her completely. Always, as usual, we remind you to pray for anyone and everyone that you know who are dealing with cancer in some way. Pray for the patients, pray for their families who stand with them, pray for their medical caregivers who need God's wisdom in treating them. Please pray in that same manner for those who are dealing with COVID. We still keep hearing of an awful lot of people who are being infected with this resurgent illness. Pray for them and for others who are dealing with the other upper respiratory and other seasonal illnesses as well, and ask God to bring healing into their lives. And as seems pretty usual now, we are also encouraging everyone to not forget, when you see these news reports of horrific weather disasters, people really struggling to recover after bad storms, please just remember to pray for them. Ask God to be with them. The wildfires, all of it. Ask the Lord to protect his people wherever they are. We woke up this morning to the news that Damascus, Syria, has now essentially fallen into the hands of the rebels who have been raising Cain there for the last week or two. No one knows what will come of the transfer of power in Syria, but the region is so tightly wrapped already, just so stressed, that it cannot but add to that stress load. So please be praying for peace in the Middle East, in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Israel, in Palestine, now in Syria, in Iran and Iraq. Pray for peace in Ukraine and Russia. Pray for peace in the Koreas, where there was turmoil in the last week. Pray for peace in Sudan, the place so close to Pam's and my heart. And in all the other places where people are not getting along, ask the Lord to anoint them with peace. Those are the requests on our list today. Very briefly, we will welcome you to add things to this list. Online, you'll need to unmute. Here in the room, you can wave your arm. Yes,
And I'd
Marcia
like to ask
Cripps.
for prayer. Yes, I'd like to ask for prayer for our son Trent. He will be having knee replacement on Tuesday this week.
Sorry, Marcia, say again, which day? Tuesday? Thank you. He's keeping up the family tradition. What a good guy.
Yeah, he thanked me for it.
We will be praying for him. Thank you for letting us know.
Hey,
Oh,
Ron,
Jeff.
I just wanted to, I think I've already told you about this, but being an Uber driver, I went down to Earlham and had picked up a student there that was from Syria, and he was visiting his other friend that goes to Earlham from Syria. And the gentleman that was there visiting, he went to Yale, is where he was from, and he got talking to me on the way out to Indianapolis, and it was just an enlightening conversation about his life and what he had been through. He was part of that Syrian where protesting against Assad, and he was put in prison there as a protester. And he said, the prisons in Syria are different. He said the man was pretty evil, Assad, and they buried him in prison. You were buried underground in a grave, basically. And he said a lot of them passed away, but he made it through, and he got out of Syria and lives in Berlin now. But he goes to Yale, and this was all through that, picking him up down there at Earlham and driving them to Indianapolis. But he wrote me this morning. We became friends on Facebook. And, I said, and part of what he was doing in Berlin was trying to organize a democracy in Syria. And that's what part of his whole shtick was, but to try to bring democracy to Syria. And so we talked this morning, and I said, well, your efforts are finally coming through. And he wrote me back and said, yeah, his pain and suffering that he went through were finally showing some fruition there. And so, it was just an interesting engagement with somebody down there in Earlham, and then to find out and he was real curious about how democracy had come to the USA. And he wanted me to kind of tell him about some of that, and was real interested in the Freemasons and some of those things that had kind of, I guess, brought democracy to the USA. So in years past, but it really enlightened me and touched me, the fact that from over a year ago is when I drove that guy, and then to have him tell me all those things, and then to see what's happening in the news, was kind of encouraging. And I know that the different forces there can take over, but he was really adamant in telling me that in the USA, our battles that we're doing here politically and whatever we're going through were nothing compared to, say, what Russia and Putin and Assad and some of the axis of evil there are happening out in the world. He said that's the real evil that we should be battling here in the USA. But, so it was just enlightening to my cranial cavity, basically. And so, just wanted to share that.
Good reminder to always be praying for Jeff. He's doing this on a fairly regular basis, hauling people around. Pray for him. It's a ministry. And pray for the people that he's giving rides to, that they will be receptive to Christ in Jeff. And it's a good reminder to pray for Syria today as well. Thank you, Jeff. Any other concerns before we go?
I was saying Mom's first ring in yours was in 2007, this day in 2007. Mom's first brain aneurysm.
Wow.
2007, so 17 years ago.
Marcia Holligras said that Karen Peters' first brain aneurysm with the really crisis surgery down in Indianapolis was in 2007. So this is the 17th anniversary of that event. We give thanks that Karen is with us, fully with us. We're really, really grateful. And Norm is questioning that fully. Oh, well, I tried. Would you join me in prayer for just a moment? Let's lift these concerns to the Lord as we close this meeting. Let's pray. Father, we are so grateful for the privilege of being together today with others who love and serve you. So grateful for your life in all of these friends. Grateful for their ministries out in this community and the places that they inhabit. We ask for your blessing on each and every one of them, that you will make us your ministers. Help us to be obedient. Help us to be sensitive to your voice and your nudge. Give us courage when you ask us to do things that may make us uncomfortable. But help us to be committed to you to make a difference in the world. We've come to you, Lord, to ask for your help for all of these friends we've spoken of who are on this list and the ones that are on our heart that haven't even been mentioned. You know them inside out. We need not repeat these to you. You've overheard our conversation. We simply commit them into your care and ask that you will provide exactly what is needed in each case at the exact time that it is most needed, and that you will make sure that they know it was you who did it. We desire so much, Lord, to be found reverent in your presence, to revere you for who you are and for what you have done and what you still promise to do. You are greater than our minds can take in. You are more loving and compassionate than our hearts can comprehend. You are wonderful. You are the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. You are holy. Help us to live worthy of your friendship. Help us to be faithful servants of your kingdom. Bless us in the time of fellowship we have downstairs today. Nourish us not just from the food, but from that fellowship, from the sharing of others. We ask, Lord, that you would receive our gathering here this day as an expression of our love and our devotion and our reverence for you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, Mary Clark. You sure help us celebrate Christmas. Thank you, friends, for joining us today. Go in peace. You are at liberty. And if you want to stay for lunch, you are most welcome to move downstairs.